Hello and welcome. I hope you're doing fine today. Today's topic is nutrition and metabolism. This is kind of a big subject, and so we're going to break it up into 4 parts, but these are the subjects we'll be talking about. Okay, so first let's start off by defining a nutrient. And so nutrients are substances in food needed for growth, maintenance, and repair of our bodies. And so there's 2 classifications of nutrients. There's macronutrients and there's micronutrients. There's 3 major nutrients. This is what you see when you look at a food label. So we have carbohydrates, and we're going to talk about the difference between simple and complex carbohydrates. There's proteins, there's complete proteins and incomplete proteins, lipids and fats. And while you may not think about it as a nutrient because it really doesn't provide energy, water is also one of the macronutrients. So macro means large. So these are things we need to consume in our diet in bulk. Micronutrients, on the other hand, so micro means small, these are things we only need to consume in very small quantities. And so vitamins, which are organic, these are going to be our coenzymes, and minerals, which are inorganic, and they are going to be our cofactors in our chemical reactions. So there are 2 other classifications of nutrients. Some nutrients are essential and other ones are non-essential. So that word essential, what that means is this particular nutrient, it has to be eaten, meaning the body cannot make it from other things. And so there's 8 essential amino acids, there's 2 essential fatty acids, there's 13 vitamins and 15 minerals that must be consumed in the diet. And so I think of Legos whenever I study nutrition, so you see this Lego picture a lot, and the master builder is going to be the liver. Because you have non-essential nutrients. These are things that are vital to life, like the other amino acids and the other fatty acids. But if there isn't enough consumed in the diet, then the liver can usually convert another nutrient into that needed one. And so that's why, I call it the magical organ, the liver. It is the master Lego builder. So the only things that it can't build are those essential nutrients. And so that's why those must be consumed in the diet. And so that's what that word essential means. Okay, so we just finished off digestion. And so we know that the body requires fuel as well as materials for growth. And so we break down our food products through digestion, and then we get those simple monomer units that are going to be absorbed into those capillary beds and those lacteals and the submucosa of the digestive tract. We talked about that last week or in the last lectures. And so once the cells absorb these simple molecules, the cell has 2 ways that it can go, and so it's going to metabolize these simple molecules. And so that term metabolism refers to basically all the ways that nutrients are going to be altered. And so there's 2 sides to it. I'm going to click to the next picture. There we go. I kind of like this one better. Normally when people think about metabolism, you think, oh, either someone has a fast metabolism, meaning that they can eat whatever they want and they stay skinny, or someone has a slow metabolism, and that means they gain weight easily. And that really isn't true. Metabolism refers to both sides. When we take those molecules from our food that we've absorbed and we break them down further to make ATP, that's called catabolism. So breaking down reactions, this is always going to be through hydrolysis. This is what's going to happen when we are between meals. So in this fasting and what we're going to learn as the post-absorptive state. Over here, we have anabolism. So we are made up of the same molecules as the food that we eat. So all living things are made up of those same building blocks. So we can also take those building blocks, so those simple sugars, fatty acids, and amino acids, and we can build body structures. And so that requires ATP. So anabolism, those building reactions, those are going to be through dehydration. Those are going to be favored in the fed state, so that absorptive state. And it kind of makes sense. If you don't have any money, you're not going to start a building project. So you have to have resources, so you have to have the building blocks, and you also have to have ATP in order to build body structures. So that's going to be the absorptive state or the fed state. And then when we break things down, that's going to be the post-absorptive state. So we'll get to those in a little while. Okay, so really metabolism, it's all about building and burning. So both of those together makes metabolism. All right, so you have your notes, and so far everything I've said has been written in your notes. And then I gave you this picture, and I realized that when you first glance at it, it may be a little difficult to understand. But hopefully by the end of all these lectures, your goal is to understand what I mean by all those things and what happens in the fed and fasting state. So those are the big goals for this unit. And so I'm kind of showing all the food stuff. I'm showing carbohydrates, fats and oils and proteins, and how they all plug in to these catabolic reactions in order to make ATP. And then I kind of have all these little side things, how many calories per gram is in each one, and then some special things that I want you to know. So I'll be pointing out these things as we go through, and then this will be our last slide, and hopefully it will make sense to you by the end. But this is the picture in your notes. And this is kind of a messy picture. So just sort of tying it into digestion. Like I said, we talked about digestion previously, and so we know that proteins are broken down into amino acids. We know that all carbohydrates, whether we're talking about starch or dairy sugar or whatever, it's always going to be broken down into simple sugars like glucose. And then fats and oils are going to be broken down into glycerol and fatty acids. The second stage is when cells absorb these simple monomer units, and then they have a choice to make. They can either build, so amino acids build it back up to cellular proteins. The liver and skeletal muscle can store that glucose as glycogen, or the body can build triglycerides or other fats from those molecules. Or they can take those monomer units and go through catabolism and go through glycolysis, which occurs in the cytoplasm. That just means splitting of glucose, a 6-carbon molecule, to 2 3-carbon pyruvic acids. And then as long as there's oxygen present and ATP is still needed, then pyruvic acid is going to be converted to acetyl-CoA, and then we're going to go into the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, which everyone loves. And then the acetyl-CoA is going to enter the citric acid cycle. And then we have the electron transport chain, which is the site of oxidative phosphorylation. And the big goal of catabolism is to break down those food molecules and get ATP. And that's just kind of the word version of what I just said. Yep, that's what verbiage means. It's just words for you. Okay. So cellular respiration, when we talk about that, we said that this is the reason you have to breathe. It is a set of metabolic reactions and processes that convert that biochemical energy from nutrients into ATP, which is that cellular currency of energy, and then release our waste products, which is carbon dioxide and water. Energy can also be stored for later use as glycogen and fats, which we can break down later. So this was that one formula you had to know, and now we are just adding how many ATPs, and the fact that whenever we change forms of energy, we always lose some as heat. So the complete oxidation or catabolism of glucose is going to require these 3 pathways we're going to watch on YouTube. So glycolysis, splitting of glucose, which happens in the cytoplasm either with or without oxygen. Citric acid cycle, or it's also called the Krebs cycle, happens in the mitochondrial matrix. That requires oxygen. Electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation on the inner mitochondrial membrane, that too requires oxygen. And so as we're going to watch a YouTube, as you go through glycolysis and citric acid cycle, sometimes through substrate level phosphorylation, we get money. We get paid directly. And that's a good thing, because then ATP can be used to fuel other reactions like building, like anabolism. Sometimes though, I want you to pay attention, there is something called electron carriers. So NADH and FADH2, I want you to think of those like gift cards. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally like to get gift cards because I know that they're worth something. The only downside of gift cards is they're only good at that one particular store. So these high electron carriers, NADH and FADH2, are like gift cards. In order to get their value out of them, you have to go to a particular place. In this case, that place is the electron transport chain. That is where those electron carriers are going to pass off those electrons. That finer electron acceptor is oxygen, and that's how we get water as that byproduct. But that is where we are going to redeem all that energy and make most of that ATP. And I'm hoping somewhere in your past you've heard all this before. And so looking at this picture, like I said, we're going to watch YouTube. So glucose goes through glycolysis. We get to pyruvate. acetyl-CoA, the citric acid cycle, electron transport chain, we get ATP and heat, which is what we want, that ATP. Notice that all the food can plug in, so all of our breakdown products from digestion plug in somewhere along this pathway. So glucose, amino acids, glycerol, and fatty acids, they can all be burned to make ATP. So that's that part of the picture. Okay, we'll sit back, get some popcorn. We're going to watch this amazing video, BioFlix, Cellular Respiration.
As this mountain biker heads up the trail, the breakfast he ate this morning is being burned to power his bike ride. His breathing rate increases as his leg muscles demand more oxygen to burn more fuel. Let's zoom down to where this fuel is burned, our cells. Here, the blood vessel on the left delivers fuel and oxygen to a single muscle cell. In cellular respiration, energy in fuel is converted to ATP, shown here as starbursts. Most ATP is made in the cell's mitochondria. ATP powers the work of the cell, such as contraction. Let's take a closer look at how ATP is produced from a molecule of glucose, our fuel. Only the carbon skeleton is shown to keep things simple. The first step is called glycolysis, and it takes place outside the mitochondria. To begin the process, some energy has to be invested. Next, the molecule is split in half. Now, the molecule NAD+, an electron carrier, picks up electrons and hydrogen atoms from the carbon molecule, becoming NADH. Keep track of the electron carriers. They play an important role by transporting electrons to reactions in the mitochondria. In the final steps of glycolysis, some ATP is produced, but not much. For every glucose molecule, only 2 net ATPs are produced outside the mitochondrion. However, glycolysis has produced pyruvic acid, which still has a lot of energy available. Let's follow this pyruvic acid molecule into a mitochondrion to see where most of the energy is extracted. As the molecule enters the mitochondrion, 1 carbon is removed, forming carbon dioxide as a byproduct. Electrons are stripped, forming NADH. Coenzyme A attaches to the 2-carbon fragment, forming acetyl-CoA. Coenzyme A is removed, and the remaining 2-carbon skeleton is attached to an existing 4-carbon molecule that serves as the starting point for the citric acid cycle. The new 6-carbon chain is partially broken down, releasing carbon dioxide. Several electrons are captured by electron carriers, and more carbon dioxide is released. The carbon dioxide that you exhale comes from the reactions of cellular respiration. 2 ATPs are produced by the citric acid cycle for each molecule of glucose. At this point, only a small number of ATPs have been produced. However, more energy is available in the electrons that are being transported by electron carriers. While the citric acid cycle starts another round, let's follow an electron carrier to the next step in the process. Electron carriers such as NADH deliver their electrons to an electron transport chain embedded in the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. The chain consists of a series of electron carriers, most of which are proteins that exist in large complexes. Electrons are transferred from one electron carrier to the next in the electron transport chain. Let's take a closer look at the path electrons take through the chain. As electrons move along each step of the chain, they give up a bit of energy. The oxygen you breathe pulls electrons from the transport chain, and water is formed as a byproduct. The energy released by electrons is used to pump hydrogen ions, the blue balls, across the inner membrane of the mitochondrion, creating an area of high hydrogen ion concentration. Hydrogen ions flow back across the membrane through a turbine. Much like water through a dam, the flow of hydrogen ions spins the turbine, which activates the production of ATP. These spinning turbines in your cells produce most of the ATP that is generated from the food you eat. The process you've just observed, cellular respiration, generates 10 million ATPs per second in just one cell. That ATP can power a biker up the trail, or it can power your brain cells as you learn challenging biology topics.
Okay, so this is just a summation slide. So let's just unpack what we've learned. So that very first step, glycolysis, that is the splitting of glucose. And so we had a 6-carbon glucose, we split it to 2 pyruvic acids. We made some ATP, so we got 2 ATP, but then we also produced some electron carriers. So we have 2 NADH plus hydrogen ions, and so like I said, think of those as gift cards that can only be redeemed at the electron transport chain. The pyruvic acid is going to be converted into acetyl-CoA, and oh look, we get some more gift cards. We get 2 NADH plus H, and then this acetyl-CoA is going to go through the citric acid cycle. Through the citric acid cycle, we're going to get 2 more ATP through substrate level phosphorylation, and so that's a total of 4 ATP that we made in that way. Through the citric acid cycle, though, we've gained some more gift cards. So we have some more high electron carriers. So we made 6 NADH plus H's and 2 FADH2s. Like I said, think of all those electron carriers as gift cards. In order to get the energy out of them in a useful form, they have to go to the electron transport chain, which is in the inner mitochondrial membrane, so right here. And as those electrons are transferred through the electron transport chain, that energy is going to be used to pump hydrogen ions out into the space. So we've made a concentration gradient and a chemical gradient and an electrical gradient. And so when those hydrogen ions go back down their concentration gradient, it's through an ATP synthase, and we get ATP. So we get most of our energy through the electron transport chain. If you do the math, so they're saying you get 2.5 ATPs per NADH, 1.5 ATPs per FADH. And if you add up our ATPs minus the shuttle cost for acetyl-CoA, then we end up with about 30 ATPs. And they kind of go back and forth. Is it 30? Is it 32? I don't really care. I put it in your notes as 32, so we'll just kind of go with that. Okay, so how many of you like energy drinks? I forgot you're not here to talk to me. Okay, some of you have to like energy drinks. The reason they can say that it is an energy drink, if you look at vitamin water, because it doesn't have any caffeine in it. The reason it's an energy drink, if you look right here on the label, niacin, vitamin B6, vitamin B12, and niacin is B3. So 2, 3, 5 is another one, so B5 is on there as well. What these vitamins do, these are going to be micronutrients. They are coenzymes. They actually make up our electron carriers. So FAD, NAD, and coenzyme A, which we didn't really talk about, that has the attachment to, that's where acetyl-CoA comes from. And so all of those B vitamins are involved in energy gaining metabolic reactions. So anything that has B vitamins in it can bill itself as an energy drink. Okay, so other things about ATP synthesis. Most foods are converted to energy in the form of ATP, and others are going to be used as building blocks. That conversion of energy in food to ATP is about 38% efficient in usage, because every time you change states or every chemical reaction, you're always going to lose some due to heat. Thermogenesis is the production of heat. This is also why we are warm. I just want to tell you you're better than a machine, because machines are only about 10 to 30% efficient. So that's kind of where that came from. You're better than a machine. All right, so the next thing is going to be how much energy is actually in food. And so a calorie indicates the amount of potential energy food contains in those chemical bonds. So let's just go ahead and watch this TED Talk.
We hear about calories all the time. How many calories are in this cookie? How many are burned by 100 jumping jacks, or long-distance running, or fidgeting? But what is a calorie really? And how many of them do we actually need? Calories are a way of keeping track of the body's energy budget. A healthy balance occurs when we put in about as much energy as we lose. If we consistently put more energy into our bodies than we burn, the excess will gradually be stored as fat in our cells and will gain weight. If we burn off more energy than we replenish, we'll lose weight. So we have to be able to measure the energy we consume and use. and we do so with a unit called the calorie. 1 calorie, the kind we measure in food, also called a large calorie, is defined as the amount of energy it would take to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Everything we consume has a calorie count, a measure of how much energy the item stores in its chemical bonds. The average pizza slice has 272 calories. There are about 78 in a piece of bread, and an apple has about 52. That energy is released during digestion and stored in other molecules that can be broken down to provide energy when the body needs it. It's used in 3 ways. About 10% enables digestion, about 20% fuels physical activity, and the biggest chunk, around 70%, supports the basic functions of our organs and tissues. That third usage corresponds to your basal metabolic rate, a number of calories you would need to survive if you weren't eating or moving around. Add in some physical activity and digestion, and you arrive at the official guidelines for how many calories the average person requires each day, 2,000 for women and 2,500 for men. Those estimates are based on factors like average weight, physical activity, and muscle mass. So does that mean everyone should shoot for around 2,000 calories? Not necessarily. If you're doing an energy-guzzling activity, like cycling the Tour de France, your body could use up to 9,000 calories per day. Pregnancy requires slightly more calories than usual. And elderly people typically have a slower metabolic rate. Energy is burned more gradually, so less is needed. Here's something else you should know before you start counting calories. The calorie counts on nutrition labels measure how much energy the food contains, not how much energy you can actually get out of it. Fibrous foods like celery and whole wheat take more energy to digest, so you'd actually wind up with less energy from a 100-calorie serving of celery than a 100-calorie serving of potato chips. Not to mention the fact that some foods offer nutrients like protein and vitamins, while others provide far less nutritional value. Eating too many of those foods could leave you overweight and malnourished. And even with the exact same food, different people might not get the same number of calories. Variations in things like enzyme levels, gut bacteria, and even intestine length means that every individual's ability to extract energy from food is a little different. So a calorie is a useful energy measure, but to work out exactly how many of them each of us requires, we need to factor in things like exercise, food type, and our body's ability to process energy. Good luck finding all of that on a nutrition label.
So I hope you enjoyed that TED Talk. What they were talking about, there is a cost to digestion, and that cost for digesting different foods is called the dietary or diet-induced thermogenesis, or thermal effects of food. And so that is actually true. There are different costs to different types of foods to digest them. Typically fats are the easiest, weirdly enough. They take the longest, carbohydrates, and then the most energy is actually consumed when you break down proteins. So just thought I'd share that little fun fact for you. Okay, so the TED Talk did a really nice job, so here's just some verbiage for you. So calorie indicates the amount of potential energy food can take. Pointing you to these values. So fats and oils, they actually have more calories per gram than either carbohydrates or proteins. And so proteins are about the same with 4 big calories or kilocalories per gram, and fats have more than twice that. And so this is why our long-term energy storage is going to be adipose tissue, so it's going to be fat, because think about it, if you have to carry something around for a really long time, like, I don't know, like when you put that weight on in high school and you're still carrying it when you're 50, you really want that to be as light as possible, so you want to get the most bang for your buck. So when you go camping, you don't bring a whole bunch of canned goods, because canned goods will be way heavy. You're going to bring in some freeze-dried food, so things that won't weigh as much. All right, so this table kind of highlighting just what I was just said about the calories per gram. So you get the most calories per gram from fat, so 9.5. So it's the best option to store because it's light. So go over here and let's look at uses in the body. And oh, look, we see fats are oxidized for energy and they're stored in adipose tissue. And like I said, that's because they have the most or yield the most calories per gram. So the last thing I want to talk about in this section is recommended daily allowances, so healthy eating. And so healthy eating is going to provide sufficient energy, so the right number of calories, all the essential fatty acids, essential amino acids. Remember, the liver can't make those. They have to be consumed in the diet. All the vitamins and the minerals that are needed. The requirements are going to vary with age, sex, growth rate, level of physical activity. When someone is stressed, they require more calories, and genetic and environmental factors. Healthy eating from your government. When I was a kid, it was food pyramids, and now we have My Plate. And so this just kind of guidelines representative proportions on your dinner plate. And notice there's a whole bunch of vegetables and fruits and grains, and protein is very small. The basic dietary principle is going to be eat only what you need, eat less overall, eat plenty of fruits, vegetables, whole grains. These are going to be complex carbs. We'll define it when we come back in the next lecture. And not simple carbs, and no trans fats, so basically avoiding junk food. Nutritional information as well as ingredients have to be listed on most grocery items. It's not really on fruit, but on packaged food for sure because of our federal Food and Drug Administration. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Enjoy the rest of your day.